so you can see that the seam is right on the edge of the fabric. I just want to double check how wide it is, wanting to make sure that when I sew, I will sew on the left side of that seam allowance. So if I sewed with a seam allowance that would be smaller or the same, when I'm turning it right side out, it might just show some fraying bits of fabric. So I want to make sure if I position this, and you can actually feel where your seam edge is. I want to go wider than that. Place my fabric underneath, and again I want to backstitch beginning and end. And I sew along the seam. And backstitch. So you can see we've got the French seam showing on the inside of the bag. On the outside of the bag, we just have a regular seam. Next thing, we want to go and just lay it with the buttonhole up. Still from the inside of the bag, with the wrong sides facing out. Our next step will be to iron under about 1 centimeter or so. And then iron under again to create this casing for our drawstring. However, because the French seam here is quite a bulky seam, and if you have to fold over that and fold over it again, it creates a lot of bulk, and it'll also make it very, very hard to fit your drawstring through. Because it will be enclosed, we can cut part of this French seam that doesn't show. Cutting a small distance, but not too close, so I'm using about 0.5 centimeter or less here. Cut till you get about to the middle of your buttonhole, not much further, and then at an acute angle. Cut the rest of the seam off like this. So I've still got about this much to go past my buttonhole, because I know my casing is not going to go much further than the buttonhole. Do the same on the other side. So again, don't want to go further than that. And I'm using an acute angle here. So now I have very little bulk. Back to the ironing board. Fold over your fabric towards the inside of your bag for 1 centimeter. Press it into place. It's good to use some steam there because it'll stay into place more easily. Fold it over, and then to get an even edge, I just go and line up my top edge with the one underneath. After you've pressed this, it makes it really easy to just flick the end bits over without fiddling and having to readjust millimeter here and a millimeter there. We'll press the ends as well. Okay, I'm a lot happier with this now. And I repeat the step on the other side, pressing it just the same edge. And then flicking this over. Give it a press again. And now you want to put a few pins in. The most important part to pin is your side seam. You want to have the side seam continuously lining up, because sewing the casing, we're going to sew around in one large circle, and as you sew it can pull and twist your fabric. Having a pin in on either side of each side seam will stop that from happening. The same on this side here as well. you will have to fold your French seam to one side or the other. You can put more pins in, but this should hold it in place for me. Double check again. I'm actually going to even this up a little bit here. Turn on your machine, and now it's time to, if you do have that option in your machine, to remove the flatbed to have a free arm. All I need to do now is move my fabric over here, and I can easily sew along without having to having an obstruction or having to make sure that there's no fabric caught underneath. If you can't remove the flatbed, that's fine. It'll still be very easy to sew. Just make sure that your fabric doesn't get caught being a loop underneath your stitching and you don't stitch one side to the other. You're still on your straight seam with your regular presser foot. You can align, depending on the seam allowance that you ironed under. I used a centimetre, so I can align the edge of my presser foot with the edge of this fabric. And so, if you've turned under a little bit less, you might want to go in a little bit further, so you can still catch the seam allowance underneath. Okay, and now you're just going to start sewing, and you can backstitch as you start, or you can wait to the end, because you are going to sew over the same seam again, being a continuous loop. And I will cut my thread just before I get there, so it doesn't get tangled up, especially underneath. If you've sewn really, really well, your stitching will match up with your initial line, so that's what you're aiming for. Go over just a few stitches of your initial stitching, and then back stitch for a few as well. Lift your needle. And cut your thread. So now you can turn the right side of your fabric to the outside again. And you can see how I've got the French seam on the inside and a regular seam on the outside. Again, it's a good time to press before you put your drawstring in, because your fabric will still lie nice and flat. Pressing your seams. Same on the other side. And the sewing component of your drawstring bag is actually done already. Now all you need to do is thread through your string. So I've chosen the white ribbon, but you can use a cord or anything that tickles your fancy. And to make it a little bit easier getting it through, I will use a safety pin. Insert it at one end. Close it up. And I'm going to insert it through one of the buttons and push it through as I go. You've most probably done this before, but if you haven't, you want to push with your thumb while gathering the fabric. Now, when you were little, you might have had a bag like this to keep your pajamas in, tidy, during the daytime, after you made your bed. Once you've threaded this through, tie a knot. You can also tie a bow if you like. If you make this is quite a masculine fabric, so if you're making it for a man, I would maybe not tie a bow. But if you're making it for a woman or a little girl, finish the ends of your ribbon by folding them in half lengthwise and cutting at an angle like a V. It gives it a little bit of a polished look. It'll also unravel a little bit less easily. So this is my drawstring bag while it's lying flat, and you can see how it fits maybe a few books or a pair of shoes, pyjamas. And then when you want to close it, you just pull on your string, and you can hang it up like this against your door handle, against a hook, or you can even carry it over your shoulder like this. As little kids like to do, just drag it on the floor. So you see, with a few easy sewing techniques, you've created a really simple but very versatile item that looks quite neat and is a really, really nice present. And it's actually a really nice gift bag for a present as well. I hope you enjoyed this, and the next item we're going to make is a zippered pouch.